everyone, Trace here. I'm doing the last of the Emboss Like a Boss challenge for the Maymay Made It design team. I'm going to be making an embossed gingerbread cookie jar card, and I'm going to use as many embossing techniques as I can possibly do. So these are the things you're going to need. I'm going to use 3 different stamp sets. This one here is Gingerbread. Of course, we have to have gingerbread people, and Jar of Fun stamp set, and Ginger Font stamp set. This one's really large, lots and lots of stamps on there. I'm going to be embossing with the Crackle Doris embossing folder. And so the papers, I'm going to need a card base. It says A2 size. Just a scrap of some patterned Christmas paper. This was in my stash, and I just really like the pattern. I'm going to use some vellum. This is just really thin, see-through paper. I'm going to use some red cardstock and craft cardstock. Cutter bee scissors, art glitter glue, and for inks I'm going to be using VersaFine and Versamark and my embossing pouch here with a heat tool. Also the Nouveau embossing powder Glacier White. And I think that's it. I'm just going to craft as I go, or go as I craft, or however you want to say that. It's just kind of in my head that the ideas are in my head and so forth, so I'm just going to go with it. I have not made another sample prior to this, so we're just going to have some fun. And so let's get started. So the first thing I did was I ran this red card front, which is cut at 4 by 5 1/4, and I ran it through my Big Shot with the embossing folder. So that's what that is. That's going to be my card front. Next, I'm going to heat emboss a jar on this piece of vellum. So I just cut it to fit my Misty here. And I decided to go with a clear embossing powder instead of the white. We'll see. So I've got my jar here. I've already kind of got it there. So I'm going to use some Versamark, and I'm going to ink that up. Just making sure it's nice and covered because it's a really large stamp. And also while I'm doing that, on my other hand, look how multitasking. I am going to pounce that with the powder here and see if I can, wow, so coordinated. Now I am going to press that down. I think that's good. Should be pretty good. And I'm just going to press that down, making sure it is all covered. Like I said, it's a large stamp, and it looks like I've got it covered pretty well. So we're just going to take that off. And I have a scrap piece of paper here. As you can see, it's pretty well used. And the clear embossing powder. So what I'm just going to cover this jar with powder. I know it looks like a lot of powder, but it's mostly going to go back into the jar. So I'm just making sure that's nice and covered. It looks really well. Possibly a little spot here. If there's any places that got some and you don't want it, I usually take a paintbrush or something and just kind of wipe it away. But other than that, it looks good. Next, I'm just going to put all the rest of that back into the jar. So that's all set. And the mess is very minimal. Next, I'm going to just heat that. So I've got my heat tool. I'm going to start it up, let it go for just a few seconds to get nice and hot. Then I'm going to heat that up. So it's going to get a little loud. So just continuously move your tool while that is heating up. And it's going pretty quickly. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's really cool. You can see that pretty good. Make sure it's all heated up. You can barely see it, but I really like that. And that's how I wanted it to be, where you could hardly see it, because a jar would be clear glass. So then I'm going to cut that out with some cutter bee scissors and be back with the next step. So next I'm going to emboss some gingerbread men and some words here, or letters, and I'm going to spell out yum, and I'm going to do a couple of those. And I've got some craft, so I am going to emboss it in white this time with some Versamark. Okay, now that I finished the embossing here, I'm going to fussy cut that out with my cutter bee scissors. And I also stamped the ruffle on the pattern paper here. I'm also going to cut that out. So I'll cut all that and be right back. So I have everything ready to go onto the card. I've got my cookies ready, and I stacked them kind of where I want them. I'm going to be filling the jar with cookies. And I've got my word yum here, and I even have my little ruffle I cut out. And I'm going to add this little strip just to bring in this paper here. So I'm going to add that to the back, just about there. Now also, when I'm going to assemble this, I'm going to pop up some of them, and I wanted to be able to see where the cookies are going to go. So I'm going to, of course, stack those first. So I used a pencil and I traced, and you can't see it, I'm sure, but it's very lightly traced. I just traced the jar where I want it to be. So now I can start stacking these cookies, and it won't go beyond the jar. So it will look like it's actually inside the jar. And of course I've got one that's got a bite out of it. He's going to go on the outside. And so I'm going to pop up some of these with foam squares, and some just layered, on top of each other, kind of in the way that I have it there. So I'm going to put it all together, and I'll be right back. So this month's of Emboss Like a Boss was really fun, and I hope that you learned some new things, and I certainly did too. And so I can't wait for next month, more challenges for the design team. And thank you so much for watching, and subscribe and like and comment, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.